hopefully she'll.
Oh, let's pause. Record. Okay, now separation. Prishut, he says, the Ramchal. In conduct consists of secluding and separating oneself from societal company in order to turn one's heart to the divine service and to proper reflection in it. So you can't go to the bar every night, right? If you want to be a true servant of God, it's not going to happen at Cheers. Sorry. Right? One must separate oneself from that levity and excessive socialization. I was Googling something yesterday. I was thinking to myself, I see my kids and they're never bored. They're never bored anymore because they're always doing something. They've always got a screen in front of them. And, I never find them just sitting there and I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm bored. Which I was thinking through, like, what did that do for us? In a way, I think it forced us to be a bit more ingenious about what we did and found things to do.
And could reflect on things if we wanted to.
Yeah, and maybe there was even a natural reflection built into that. Like, even if you didn't want to, your mind started to reflect on things. Yeah, very, very possible. Okay. Welcome, Audrey. You're muted, by the way.
Thank you.
But now you're with us. Fine. So this is a beautiful. Oh, hang on, I didn't stop reading. This is on condition. So says the Ramchal, and this is where he's. I like the Ramchal so much because he really. He's a very normal person at the end of the day. I'm not sure how eccentric he was in his own lifetime, but the guidance that he gave to everyone else seems very, very fair. This is on condition that one does not turn in this to the opposite extreme. Our sages of blessed memory always said a person's mind should always be associated with others. Yeah, daitoi mu'urav im habriut. Right, a person's opinions and the ability to socialize and to relate to others is very important, and this is a beautiful picture, by the way, of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, who, was a towering intellectual, and I'm sure like nothing more than to, sit and study and contemplate and write. And yet he was a man of the people. He went out, he made music, he visited, he really made sure that he was mu'urav im habriut, to be associated with others. So, this is where there's balance. There's balance. Definitely have been extreme personalities. Now, this is a very interesting thing. It's an amazing thing, actually, that the Talmud could say, because the Talmud prizes nothing above learning. That the Talmud Chacham, the learned scholar, is the goal. The learned scholar is the leader. The learned scholar is the king. There's nothing that comes before learning in the eyes of the Talmud. And yet, it says these words: a sword is upon the boasters. Well, okay, it's going to be a play on words. So the badim are the boasters, right? People who are boast, and they shall become foolish. But the Talmud makes what's called a drasha, play on words, and it says the word bad means to be alone, to be separate. So a sword is upon the enemies of the disciples of the wise who sit separately, bad bad, and study Torah. What is more, they become stupid, right? So the Talmud was very against the person isolating themselves and studying by themselves. One of the biggest differences between university and yeshiva is the library. Because I remember at university, you went to study in the library, and it was silent. In fact, if you made a noise, you were hushed. Right? I remember one of my good friends, Karen Rosenberg, we used to, be very good friends and often go to the library and sit opposite each other, whatever. And he always had a frog in his throat. So he was one of those guys that always used to have to clear his throat now and again. Yeah. And I remember once we were in the library, some guy was like, "Can you stop that? You're driving me mad." And then, you go to yeshiva and you walk into yeshiva and it's just this like very loud. It's really deafening. It's amazing that people can become accustomed to learning in a Beit Midrash. It's very loud. It's an amazing thing where there's this discussion. So this isn't exactly a picture of a Beit Midrash, but it's the idea that Torah is acquired through discussion and through right now an exception to the rule, who really was quite amazing, was this man called the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish, he grew up, I think, in Vilna, and he learned by himself. He was a very secluded person, and he only came to Israel later in life. I wonder when. Hey Google, when did the Chazon Ish go to Israel?
These are the top results.
No, I didn't get my Chazon Ish. Google, speak Yiddish already. What's wrong with you? So now he became a recognized scholar through his books. He wrote some very scholarly books. He was born in 1878. He died in 1953. And he only spent the last 20 years of his life in Israel. So 53 plus 22, 75, young man. He died at 75. So he was already 55 when he went to Israel. And there, he became a very public person, right? He still, I believe, spent a lot of time by himself. But he definitely changed a lot. He understood that he had a public role, which he played. And he was very, when Ben Gurion wanted to make some sort of a agreement, right, to discuss how the secular Zionist world organization politics was going to work with the old yeshuv, with the religious, he had to meet their leader. And there are famous pictures of when he came, and they met together. Many stories about that meeting. Okay, but it was an interesting exception But in later life, he was very much part of, he embraced his public role. Okay, now he turns to something very important, but the bad sort of separation. So, as we learned 2 weeks ago, right? You are an individual. You have to know what's your nature, what are your shortcomings, where do you need to be, where do you need to be very careful, where you don't need to be that careful, right? Where you're strong, where you're weak, you got to decide. You got to be, even if you can't be all the time with people and go to every party and a socialite, that's not going to work to achieve your spiritual or moral elevation. But nevertheless, you need to be ma'urav in abriut. You need to be mixed. You do need to associate and relate to others, and especially when it comes to learning Torah, one needs to do this with other people. Now, there's a bad sort of separation, is that of the foolish people who abstain not only from taking of the world the non-essential, but also from taking that which is essential. They smite their bodies with sufferings and strange afflictions which God does not desire at all. On the contrary, our sages said it is forbidden for a man to afflict himself. I'm not sure if throughout Jewish history this has always been abided to. Well, it does seem to be some indication that, you know, people out of acts of penance and things like that were involved in self-flagellation, but definitely from the time of the Ramchal and onwards, it's been something so foreign to Jewish practice, right? Now, I went to look. My wife was working at Johns Hopkins University, right, doing research. I mean, these are some of the most sophisticated people in the scientific world, and she had a Muslim woman working in her lab from Pakistan, and one day came in looking black and blue, and she was like, what's going on here? And she said, well, you know, it's the day of the death of their leader, and they practice self-flagellation, and, you know, she had beat up on herself pretty badly. You know, this is a very, I looked for pictures, they're grotesque. You know, this is, you can't even know what this is until I tell you that this is a picture of, you know, these people using these kind of whips of sort to, you know, lash themselves. This is completely foreign to Judaism.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes.
So a lot of things in Catholicism or Christianity stem from Jewish practices. And I know that in the early days of the Catholic Church, that was very, very common. Did they get that from some practice that was happening within Judaism?
It might have, you know, unfortunately, I don't know the history well enough. You know, I have seen or really stories about people, you know, really, you know, I don't know about whipping themselves, but yeah, even, you know, Yom Kippur, the idea of, you know, in some communities, they would ask their friends to give them lashes as a way of, you know, punishment. So I don't know. It's an interesting question, you know, maybe we could research it. Self-flagellation in Jewish, you know, in Jewish history. But it really does seem to be antithetical to the whole idea. There's even this comment of the sages which says, interesting, because fasting is part of Jewish custom, right? It's part of Jewish ritual. That's definitely a form. So it says, in regarding, before this is very interesting. Regarding charity, they said, whoever needs to take but does not take is as if one sheds blood right? So you don't want to take charity, but you're starving, you're shedding blood. And likewise, they interpreted a living soul, the soul that I gave you, keep it alive. And it says, and whoever sits in fast is called a sinner, which they qualified as being in the case where a person is unable to withstand it. So there definitely is, and by the way, that's a hunger strike was found that a very interesting social way of putting pressure on decision makers that you refuse to eat. But
I think that's different in kind than self-flagellation.
yeah, it's kind of using it for
It's different in kind. Paul the apostle said, I chastise my body. Refers to self-inflicted bodily scourging. And Martin Luther practiced self-flagellation, among others.
Well,
Christian, it's a Christian thing.
And also Muslim, at least
and Greek and Greco-Roman as well.
You know, the Torah is full of prohibitions about, you know, cutting oneself or you know, any sort of physical causing oneself physical pain. All right, one's even not allowed to cause oneself physical embarrassment.
Yeah.
Okay. Rather, oops. So he says, right, as Hillel. Now we think of Hillel as, you know, one of our most saintly, righteous people. Hillel would apply the verse, the pious man does good to his own soul. To eating the morning meal, he would make sure that he had eaten, that he had food. He would also wash his face and hands in honor of his maker, inferring from the practice of washing from statues of kings. You got a Buckingham Palace and the statue outside is beautifully polished, clean and polished. So he said, that's who we are, right? We're the vessels containing or expressing, allowing God's will to come into this world. We should be well fed. We should be clean. We should look good. And therefore, one should eat well, and one should dress well. Looked very well dressed, this young man that I found. I don't think, well, eating well, I don't think we've got a problem with, right? Dressing well, now and again, I do find people miss the boat, right? And they might, in all walks of life and in all denominations, right? Even some very religious folk, you know, you could wear it, you could look very unkempt in a black suit and a white shirt. Yeah, and you could look pretty good in jeans and a t-shirt. It's all got to do with your self-esteem and obviously the quality and the care that you have for your clothes. But, right, these are things that he's saying one should not try to diminish, right? So do not, as a way of separating from the world, right? It would be stupid. It would be wrong to try stay away from what is necessary, right? So it's necessary to eat well. Now, do you have to indulge? Do you have to? No, that you don't have to. We're back to the chocolate cake. You should dress well. You should dress well and be presentable. Do you have to indulge in, you know, the best of the best and the most expensive? No, absolutely not. But you got to live in the world. You got to be amongst people. It's a very hard balance, this, right? And I know very, you know, in the very observant world. There's a lot of discussion about how much internet access people should allow themselves, right? Because for obvious reasons, right? The internet for someone who's I think, I don't know what other problems, but the main problem is the sexual arousal and inappropriateness. So people struggle with that. People struggle with that, and the more that our world is here, it becomes a necessity, right, to have internet. So how do you deal with that, and how it's a big discussion. Not sure anyone's got it right yet. So he says like this at the end of this rather interesting chapter, right? Here then is the true general principle. Whatever worldly matter is not essential for man, it is proper for him to separate from it. No luxuries. The story is told of the first Lubavitch rabbi, Rebbe of Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was a very saintly man. And I think one of his sons got a coat with a fur collar. It was northeastern Belarus, so it was very cold. But he felt that was a luxury. And I think the story is he ripped it off his son and said, no, that's too much of this world. You don't need it. You need a coat, of course, but not the fur collar. Glad he's not around, otherwise he'd rip mine off. But okay, so whatever is non-essential worldly endeavor is you don't need. But whatever is essential to him, for whatever reason, if he separates from it, he is a sinner, since that thing is necessary for him. So it made me think that, this world is a very narrow bridge. That's what Rabbi Nachman of Breslov said. It's a narrow bridge. And you have to make decisions all the time. You could overdo it. You could underdo it. It's not easy to find the balance. You could veer off the path very easily. So that's it. That's the story of what we call Prishut. And then next week, we'll start the divisions of separation. But next week's going to be President's Day weekend, Monday. And hopefully I'm going to be skiing, which is necessary.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Very necessary for me right now.
Yeah.
And so we're going to take a break for a week.
That's good that you're saying that you're going skiing, because that's the question I was thinking is, how do we decide how much luxury is necessary? Is it good enough to say, I had a walk in the park, that was good, as compared to, I had a nice walk at a mountain resort, as compared to, I put on skis when I had that nice walk at the mountain. And there's a balance. And I think that's important for all of us to find that within ourselves.
Yep.
So I'm glad to know you're skiing. So
Just please don't break a leg.
Yes, Mother.
Don't break anything. I have a comment, which something about that bothers me. Because indeed, we would live very narrow lives if we would not partake of anything that is not absolutely necessary. And it just brought to my mind a question. And if you think this is off the topic, just tell me and I'll stop here. But I was reading something about the Square, new square in New York State. Are you familiar with it? The Square Hasidism sect, I suppose is the right word. And in the book, it said that the rabbis taught the young man who was in yeshiva there, don't ask questions, because There are no questions that are not answered in the Torah. Therefore, there are no questions to be asked because everything is in the Torah. And that is not to my way of thinking, the way I would think.
What got you there? I mean, it's an interesting topic, but what got you from what we were talking about to there?
Because of how narrow it would be, that narrow bridge, how tiny and limited is your life if skiing is not necessary and you can't do it and you can't ask a question. I am interested in many things that are totally outside the spectrum of where I live and what I live, how I live my life. I'm interested in learning lots of things. If I were in that sect of Hasidism, which I am not, I wouldn't be allowed to learn that stuff. It would not be necessary. And I know that possibly what we were just discussing dealt more with material things,
Right.
but that's
to take it there. We can think about that. Anyone else have any comments on that?
Oh, I do. You know, I think about the fact that both myself and my aunt, we love to quilt. My father says to me, how many blankets do you need? Enough already. And I'm like, oh no, there's patterns, there's desire, it's artistic. You know, so how much do you need? Quilting is a hobby. I don't need another blanket, but it gives me great joy. So there's that, what do you need versus what do you want?
I see a stack behind you.
Yeah, yes, I love this.
Yeah.
Quilts, not the finished stack that's already in the linen closet, you know. So
it's a good point, and some people are addicted to purchasing and buying. Some people are addicted to getting more and more and more of something. And of course, if it's fabric and quilting supplies, it's okay. That's my opinion.
Basically. All right. You know, unfortunately, I got to run. I have another meeting.
Great conversation. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Don't break a leg.
No, have a wonderful time.
Thank you.